Okay,
reset.
so Tokwe, let me ask a question.
Yes.
The industry has consistently said that really what lies at the root of the challenges we have is the lack of financial viability. Do you think that rather than this four-pronged strategy, really there should be a focus on just dealing with that finance issue, right? And then enable the industry to work a little bit better, right? Rather than go through, because one might say that really everything follows financial viability. So there's no point looking at these other 3 or 4 things until you've dealt with that.
That's an excellent question. So I have had over 2 decades, I look young, but I've had over 2 decades of finance experience. So the way I explain to my clients about finance is like the roof of a house, not the foundation, not the pillars. So you don't start a house by putting the roof. The roof can only come in when everything else is in place. So when people complain about finance, like when I talk to people, entrepreneurs, they want to start a business. They say, I want money so I can start a business. I say, no. You put everything else in place, and the money comes. So it's the same issue. So the structural issues we have, and I'm going to talk a bit about my stint at NSI. First of all, with the disclaimer that I don't speak for NSI, is the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. It's like a country savings for those that don't know. And while we were there, we managed about $1.35 billion for the country. So I'm going to talk about my stint there because we did look at a number of power transactions during the privatization. And usually when you look at investments like that, you have 3 options. You have what they call a buy, a sell, and a hold. A buy means that it's a good transaction, put your money in it. A sell is like run away. And a hold is like keep looking at it. And while we were there, all the transactions we look at, they were all holds. There was no buy. And they were holds because the system and the structure was not well put together. And what we were hoping, or what I was hoping, and what I could swear at that time, was that nobody would put money. I know there are Discos here, Genco representatives here that put money in, and I'm sure there are bankers here that put money in. But in our own analysis then, we looked at it with the highest level of prudence, and it did not make sense to put money in. So if you did put money in, we're here to discuss your issues, how to get your money back. But for me, I looked over and over, and this is after I'd been in BPE, after I'd had a heart for, I want to do power. I was trying to find a way to put the money. I could not make myself put money because the structure was just not tight. So to wrap up, in summary, finance is like the roof. Everything else, critical issues have to be in place. Otherwise, the money is going into a basket and it's lost forever.
Okay. So you've looked at the PSRP. In concept, great document, you say. What about in execution?
So the flaws that I found in the original privatization exercise, a number of them are still present in the PSRP. And what are the flaws? I'll step back and use my, and I'm not going to say so, I'm going to try not to go beyond confidentiality here because I've been involved in a lot of projects. Right. So I was the project manager for Second Niger Bridge, so which basically means that I was the one that structured the transaction. So while doing that, there was a element of government intervention, a 30 billion that government had to put in. The normal way to structure the deal would have been that private sector put in your money, government put in your money, pari passu. They call it pari passu. So as we are going, government puts in their money, we put in our money. Government puts in their money, we put in our money. But guess what? All the financiers said, Nigerian government, no. We cannot go lockstep with Nigerian government. Not because the government is not credible, but because the government is bureaucratic. The government has to go through many processes. The government may approve, Senate may not approve. Many things may happen. And at the end of the day, the business is shut down. So what we eventually evolved was that government, put your money first. When we see it, we touch it, we smell it, we taste it, then we put our money. So that's the structure that we came up with. Now, the PSRP right now has too many government dependencies. that something will happen, that somebody will go to work and forget to bring his bag, and something will happen, and then we're back where we started from. So what you do in policy, understanding Nigeria, so most of these policies have to be tropicalized, so to speak, such that you minimize government's day-to-day involvement. Policy level, regulatory level, but government has to take a step before you take a step. No,
Right.
not the Nigerian government.
Okay. I'll come back to you. I'm being told that you had a minute left, but my clock tells me you had 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes. So don't worry. I'll keep your 2 minutes. We'll use it at the end. Chiagozie, nationalize.
Nationalize.
Everything should go back into public hands, into the government, into the hands of the government. Explain why you
Speak
think.
to that. Okay, very well. I'll speak to that, but I must caveat it first of all by saying that at times, as this goes on, I might appear like a hostile witness. And you begin to wonder, which side am I really on? But really, let's try and make a case for nationalization. Do you know, I was going to say privatization. Anyways, look, truth of the matter is, nationalization is the option available to the frustrated and to the exasperated. And the truth of the matter is that Nigerians are frustrated and exasperated at what's happened in the power sector with the so-called privatization. You know, notice I said so-called privatization. Okay? And so really, let's look at the pros and cons of nationalization. Okay? Let's look at the pros, first of all. The first pro is that it puts the Nigerian government, arguably, in no better or worse position than it is at the moment. Okay? And that is based on the assumption, and this is an assumption I know that many people will find controversial, that essentially all the balance sheets of the discos in particular are fundamentally in the red. Okay? So I've heard figures bandied around about $700 billion or naira that we pay to people. And I'm asking myself, based on what? Take the whole damn thing back for nothing. Okay? And the thing is, fundamentally, Nigerians also think that power is something that ought to be subsidized. Let's face it. Okay? It's so fraught with politics that no government, or very few, have been able to really grasp that nettle of pricing it properly. But you see, if the government is carrying the can, okay, and subsidizing it all the way, and it's presumably in the public sector, people don't complain so much about it. Okay? So when it comes down to it, the main pro for me of nationalization is that government takes it back, okay, without paying a dime, right? And subsidizes it as it's arguably doing at the moment. There's already, people say there's no power subsidy. There is a subsidy, it's just that government is subsidizing the wrong people. Government is actually, with its policies, subsidizing those who sell generators and other things, but not the actual consumers of electricity. Okay? So, if you ask me, the nationalization, okay, enables government to wipe the slate clean and then try to make the sector right.
Okay, Chiagozie, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Given what are admitted in the parlous state of our finances, how do you expect that I presume the federal, when you say government, I presume you mean the federal government.
Federal government.
Okay. First, how do you expect the federal government to raise the funding? Not just to operate, but to even expand, one.
Yes.
Two, so that's question one. The other question has to do with state participation. So maybe you should deal with this first question, right? And just deal with the financing issue. If the private sector cannot raise finances, how does the public sector expect to do that? And what instruments do you think might be available to the government to deploy?
Fair enough. That's a fair question. You're now asking me to consider the cons of nationalization.
Ah, really? Is that what I'm doing?
That's the downside.
Okay, fine. So answer the question anyway.
That's the downside. But bear in mind that at the moment, the federal government, okay, the balance sheet of the federal government is being used to, at the very least, finally,
already,
ultimately.
right?
Yeah?
Already.
Yeah. It's already happening. Do you understand? So it's already being used to backstop the power sector. Okay? And, okay, you might say, well, there's a distinction between the CBN and the federal government, but at the end of the day, there's been interventions which haven't really worked out.
Guaranteed by the federal government.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
Now, there's going to be a confidence issue about, look, I read the PSRP, and I see here that multilateral agencies like the World Bank are willing to support the restructuring up to the tune. But that's on the assumption, perhaps, that, I agree, on the assumption that the private sector is going to be involved. But you see, the way I look at this is you could make it, you could liken it to, sorry to use this analogy, but coup plotters who, in their coup speech, tell you that on a day certain, at the right time, they will privatize again. Okay? So who knows? Maybe that will play well with the multilateral agencies. But certainly, from a political point of view, right, at the moment, I think that the issue of nationalization was a kite flown to see how it would play. On the streets, I reckon that it plays really well. Really well.
So that takes me to my another question, not even the one I went to ask second of all. How do you think it is feasible for the federal government to take these assets back without compensation?
Well, we're getting into the weeds now, the details.
No,
okay?
No.
I agree.
It's a fundamental issue.
Yeah,
actually.
fine. The thing is, look, if you are underwater already, and I take you over, right? And I take you over, right? Literally, you could say that I'm saving your neck. By the way, and even if there's going to be compensation, my view is that it should be deferred.
Just like
you're shaking your head.
Just like they would say, just like their tariffs were deferred. You see, so it takes us into almost a circumlocutus series of arguments. This industry is, quote, underwater because you, government, have consistently refused to enable us sell the energy that we produce at the right tariff.
Yes.
That would enable us have money to pay our bankers, set aside for investment, and put in our pockets as some kind of reasonable profit. It hasn't happened. Or it happened for a very short period of time. And it's only, by the way, I don't know if you guys are aware, but today, NERC announced that it had just ordered a minor review. So on the NERC website, and I hope, Patrick, maybe a month or two from now, would be enough time for us to have looked at the tariff orders and asked ourselves, is this actually a tariff, the right tariff? I don't like using the words high or low. A tariff is either the right tariff or the wrong tariff. So is it the right tariff for the industry? Maybe that's the next topic for next month. Do we now have a tariff that the discos will take the discos home as our salaries are supposed to take us home, right? So hopefully that's something that we can discuss. But today, a new set of tariffs were ordered. Now, this hopefully will be one of the few occasions in the last, 6 years since privatization? Actually the second, that NEC has announced a tariff that appears to be the case. Now, if that hadn't happened before, how can you justify the idea of nationalization? Because the equities are uneven.
You're quite right. And to be frank, it's difficult for me to suppress my true feelings. and the truth of the matter is that you pricked me enough for me to confess that, frankly speaking, nationalization is adult nonsense. That's the truth.
No. Topper now wants to switch camps. Topper wants to argue for nationalization. And then you now take his role. So, listen, what's your name? Victoria. Victoria is my timekeeper. right? And she's been frantically signaling me that
That time is
up. But my clock
far
tells
gone.
me that I still have 3 more minutes. And since my clock is the reigning clock here, my clock is correct.
So go for
So
it.
we still have 3 minutes. Okay. Nationalization. Tell us.
I was just looking at my man struggling there for this. There's a very thin case for nationalization.
You hear it? It's already caveat.
No, wait. But what I've done is I actually had time to think about it.
Yeah.
So there are 3 reasons you can give,
Okay.
3 pros. So the first one is things go back to state control. Right now, Fashola repeatedly said that it doesn't have any power in the power sector anymore, pardon the pun, because it's been privatized. State control is one of the benefits you get. And once you have state control, yes, the people on the street think that the thing has come back to them, but who it comes back to are the people in power. They can actually begin to get a budget now, and things become same old story. So state control is one of the things you do to get.
So it's a power grab, really.
It's a power grab. That's the first thing. Second thing is you cannot decide without any equivocation to offer social services. And I can imagine that a government that wants to do a renationalization, that would be the poster play, that we want to provide power for the poor.
Sure.
We want to ensure that the downtrodden and dejected can get power. So
They can subsidize it without pretense.
they can get some support. Now, for another reason to say is for strategic purposes. And what do I mean by strategic purposes? Maybe there's a need for the government to deliver services within a time frame, and they cannot push a private sector person to do it. So they want to do it by themselves. So that would be the argument.
Right.
And then when it comes to the funding, if I want to be a bit devious, the way to do the funding, if I were the government, let me not give this idea because they might.
They might grab it.
They know it
And they
already.
won't pay you. Okay. So
Let me not give this idea.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, we've had about 19 minutes, according to my clock, to talk about what we should have discussed as opening statements. I think what we have is a situation. I don't know. Let me ask the audience. Is there anyone in this audience that genuinely believes in nationalization? Speak for yourself. Is there?
Somebody over there.
Genuinely and can make a case for it.
Convincing argument.
All right. So we have the moderated panel session that should take 30 minutes, right? And I'd like it to be a little bit interactive. As you can see, you have a man that does not believe in his own cause sitting down here. So let me look. A hand was raised. I saw a gentleman.
Yeah.
Actually, there are 2 hands raised. So the gentleman holding something in his left hand. Yes, sir. Please. Do we have a microphone for him that he can use? And in 3 or 4 minutes, tell us your name, what you do, and then try and help Chiagozie out.
I am with the Federal Ministry of Power, and I'm also into investment.
No. Please. It's not a conflict of interest. He's actually the right person.
Well, however, why I am against privatization and supporting Chiagozie's view.
Yes.
One, we sold the...
Sorry. You work in the Ministry of Power presently.
Yeah.
What department? What's your...
Investment and sector development.
Okay. What's your rank?
I'm a chief investment officer.
Okay, great. So you're a senior management...
Well, you
They're senior
will observe
enough.
that lately, the discos, they sold the distribution companies to them.
Yes.
And then, at the other hand, they've been collecting grants from government to support, their business. So what's the essence? You sell something to somebody, and then the person still comes back to ask for money for you to help him out. I think it doesn't work out that way. If it's nationalization, let's, face it and work it out.
Okay. Emmanuel, right? Emmanuel. So Emmanuel, very quickly, let me ask you a question. The government in the discos still retains 40% equity, right? 40.
Please,
40.
that one is for Bureau of Public Enterprises.
No.
Because
No.
one, sorry,
Emmanuel,
if I may come in,
Emmanuel, wait.
not the Federal Ministry of Power.
Yes.
Not the Federal Ministry of Power.
Yes.
Because the state governments where these
You didn't hear my question.
I heard you.
No, you didn't. I only made an opening statement. So let me ask the question. The government, by whatever name, Ministry of Power, BPE, Ministry of Finance Incorporated, anyone, Federal Government of Nigeria, still retains 40%. Is it proper to say that the monies put in are grants when you actually, as a shareholder, should be contributing to the capital raise of the discos? You work in investment. That's why I'm glad that you said.
I'm happy you mentioned shareholder.
Yes.
If you're a shareholder somewhere and no money comes into you, but you continue to give out, I don't think you are well,
Okay. All right. So we take it that Emmanuel is a nationalizer. There was a gentleman behind you also talking about nationalization.
Ozemena, incidentally.
Two Emmanuels. Okay.
I'm a public policy consultant.
Yes.
What to do, the first question to ask is, I've listened to most of the current investors in power. They say we were unable to do proper due diligence before buying. In other words, they didn't really know in the real sense of the word, they didn't know what they were buying into. So if you look at the level of investment they have made in the sector, it's actually zero investment. Zero investment in the sense that if you buy into a company, one of the things you need to do is to say, these are my key performance indicators. These are the things I want to achieve from year 1, year 2, year 3. Across the sector as it is, my thinking is that it's like buying a market in the night. I don't know whether any of us on your way back to work at Oshodi, you drop and then they raised one t-shirt and you say, this must be the real t-shirt. And by the time you get home, you discover you just bought the wrong thing. So what to do at this point is simply make a perfect exit and say, look, I have bought the wrong thing. For instance, it's out there in the Yola Disco. The people who invested say, look, we are pleading force majeure. We are no longer interested. That's what I expect the current investors to do. Look, we bought the wrong t-shirt. Please take it back and thank you.
Did not plead force majeure on the grounds that they had bought the wrong t-shirt. They claimed that the t-shirt was already torn. Right? Let me continue with the analogy. The Northeast, which is where Yola Disco covers. It covers Yobe, Taraba, Yobe, Bauchi, Gombe, Adamawa, Taraba, and Borno states. Right? They claim that they couldn't operate. Not that they were not like the others that they had got or they had not been able to do diligence or that. They knew. Now, to address the due diligence question, so I'll disclose, when I was commissioner in NERC, I was in the thick of the privatization. And the one thing that we did was to say to everybody, we are selling as is, right? We know the risks. We are disclosing the risks that as they are known, and we did disclose those risks. And we said to them, we will take a period of time after the sale, right, with you in place, the buyers, to try and correct whatever issues we had, which were largely financial. And we did. We actually did. We had an interim rules period in which the rules were not strictly enforced. All sorts of things happened. So it's tough for the discos co-investors to now say that they didn't know what they were buying. They knew what they were doing. The problem, I think, and this is my opinion, is that they thought that they would still make a lot of money anyway, right? They thought they were buying GSM licenses in most cases, which has not turned out to be the case. All right, there's a gentleman here. He's the last person that will be on the pro side, and then we will start talking about the resets. If there's anyone who thinks that we should reset and what they think. So those of you who are on the reset side, you don't necessarily have to agree with talking about reset being about financial viability. Define for us what you think a reset should be. Okay, sir.
My name is Engineer Haya Muhammad Sani. from Dangote Cement Transport.
Why don't you want him to hold the microphone?
He said he will hold it for me.
Okay. No, we're within time. We have up to the
Dangote Cement
1855.
Transport, and I'm a
Oh, I
compliance
see.
/ project engineer there.
At Dangote Cement Industries.
Yes, Obajana.
Obajana, okay.
Yeah, so the reason why I'm with Mr. Chukwueze on nationalization is I was opportune to work in one of the discourse in northern Nigeria.
Does Mr. Dangote know that you are here talking about nationalization?
Yeah, no, he doesn't know I'm here, but he knows
Don't worry. We won't tell him. We won't tell him. Chatham House rules. So nobody will report him to his organ.
Yes.
All right.
So I was opportune to work in one of the discourse in Nigeria, and I attended training at Kanjidam for 1 year.
Yes.
So when I was at Kanjidam, an engineer was telling me, I don't know how true it was,
Right.
but he told me that these private owners, they purchase GEMCO's discourse on a scrap level. So why I want to say that is, if you look at them in their own aspects, when they collected the ownership of the discourse and the GEMCOs, I will set an example with maybe a keke napep or a motorcyclist. If I purchase a keke napep and I want to give it higher purchase, if it is a brand new one, maybe I don't have job, so I purchase it for my own personal use, let me be using it and source, and so it disturbs me to the level that I cannot control that keke napep because it's old, everything there is tattered.
Send it back.
Then I now take it to somebody, I say, okay, I've given you it on a higher purchase. I cannot work with it, but I gave you still on higher purchase, which you too, you thought since you see keke napep going around getting money, you collect it, and at the end when you started, it doesn't work for you. Why I bring this is, the sector has to be in good shape before privatization.
So you
that's
are-
why I am with now.
What's the name again?
Engineer Muhammad Sani Yahya.
Mohammed belongs to the fatten the cow before you sell it school of thought. All right. Great. Mohammed, thank you very much. We will not report you to Alhaji Dangote. As far as it's concerned, he has a rabid capitalist working for him. All right. So, what do you think about nationalization generally? You think it's a good idea? No. Why? Can somebody just tell me one or two reasons why? Okay, sir.
I'm giving it to angels. if it's the the public service as it is today,
Yes.
it will never work. Never. All of us know that.
So it's not about.
Government should have no business with business. We all know that too.
So let me ask you a question. It's something that we've heard time and time again. The government has no business with government. But one of the most successful countries in the world is Singapore. Singapore. Right?
You heard how I started?
Which is
I said unless you are giving it to non-Nigerians.
Singaporeans are not
Angels.
angels.
I'm sorry, I'm Nigerian. I'm
No, you said angels.
Angels.
Okay.
You said angels.
You know-
So there's no angel in Nigeria.
Let me share an experience with you. I had a project that kept me in Abidjan for 9 months. I came back 2 months ago. For those 9 months, there was no power outage. Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire is just 24 million people. I know Nigerians will say it's because it's small. It has nothing to do with the size.
That's part of the
The
reason.
point is, the people are different. There is nationalism. There is, when you are talking about the public sector, there is no sense of ownership. There's no sense of ownership. I'm sorry to take you away. If you saw Daily Times today, there's something that Ruben Abati wrote about the debt Nigeria incurred somewhere. It's in billions of dollars. It's just because we don't feel a sense of ownership in the public sector.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Val. Thank you. So let's have somebody now speak up. All right, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. My name's Kunle Kola Olubio. I'm president Nigerian Consumer Protection Network, and I was a member of the Technical Investigative Panel on System Collapses in 2013. Okay. The idea of reset is because we believe that from the end user point of view, the privatization as we have now is not what really we envisage. There's a disconnect, serious disconnect from our own point of view. One, pre-privatization, there were indebtedness by electricity consumers, which far outweigh the money the discos paid. And as you are aware, my brother, when you were in NAC, the agreement was that the discos should collect such money and pay to NEMCO. That was not done. The money they collected as supposed to go to NEMCO far outweigh the money they pay for the privatization. The other point is that there's challenges of governance structure, fiscal indiscipline, meaning that for the first 3-4 years, to the best of my knowledge, even the monies that they were collecting from us as end users, consumers, they were not remitting it to the market operators. That means that the research we are looking at about is need for review of institutional, regulatory, and legal framework that guides the sector. Then independence of the regulator. The regulator must be seen to be independent, that not that they will just wake up in the day and they are not sure that even they are trying to do some level of enforcement, power from above. Most importantly, we've noticed that the distribution company have not really done much as far as technical investment in the network. They've not been doing that. And if you look at the process of privatization, some of us believe that you can't build something on nothing. There are some discos that are supposed to come with technical partners. That technical partners is different from financial due diligence. Now, the resources of the technical partner were substituted.
I'll give you 90 seconds more.
Okay, so to wrap it up, there's need to get that reset, which, like the president have said, that by the end of this year, we should be able to have what we call a midterm review of the privatization.
What do you think a reset should be?
Yeah, we are not saying that it should go to public sector-driven power sector.
Yes.
Because we know we cannot get the best out of it. But those who don't have business in the power sector should have they should shape out. There are people who are waiting on the line that are willing to do investment.
So you're saying the research should be a reprivatization? Is that what you're saying?
Should be an appraisal, like a KPI. Mm-hmm. If you have a review, there will be like benchmarks, different threshold. And if you have this service level agreement and a whole lot of things that they signed to that they are not obliging to. So that reset, some of us who've been there, the operators are non-state actors. So we know what to say, and we've been putting pressure on the president
but
to do a review.
I'm trying to pin you down, right? I'm trying to pin you down to a specific policy measure. In your case, you seem to be saying, let us reprivatize. That's what I hear. Maybe I'm wrong.
You know, there are benchmarks, there are agreements, minimum standard of performance
yes.
that was entered into by the operators.
Yes.
Now, from the generation point of view, it's like a value chain. They've been generating and dipping hands to their pocket, and people at the lower value of the value chain, they're not remitting money to them. Mm-hmm. We have 20% of remittance in the sector. For a disco to collect 8 billion and remit 2 billion and remit 2 billion, I don't think that is what we envisage. So the sector is suffering a lot because of indiscipline and weakness of regulatory institutions. Because if those who are similarly regulators are equally partly involved as board members of the discos or the NEC that you were before, there's a sharing formula of whatever tariff that the consumer pays. So we feel that government should get you well-funded as NEC. I mean, I'm talking about NEC, you're out of NEC now, but you were part of it. So government should get NEC well-funded so that NEC could be insulated and do the job of regulation. BP is not supposed to be part. So there are a lot of governance, fiscal indiscipline, and what have you.
I hear you.
That's our own thought on research.
The governance measures or the governance
fiscal indiscipline and non-remittance.
And also be stronger on regulating and ensuring adherence.
And independence of the regulator.
To agreed standards. Okay.
My name is Gideon Yan. I'm the CEO of Anjit Kafanchan Solar. I don't know if Temitope remembers me. I presented to him in 2014, and he didn't invest in energy, so I can attest to that. But for me, as someone in the generation when the power sector...
Are you in operation now?
No, we're not. We're still waiting for our PCOA. But it's been 7 years. So the issue is prioritization. There was an AFDB report that
Did you say prioritization?
Yes.
Prioritize.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like this. Is you have a budget, right? AFDB came out with a report that said that if we meet our base load or demand load that we need as a country, we will quadruple our GDP and we'll be a G10 country. So if you understand this, this is how critical this sector is. Why are you spending 700 billion on pilgrimages if this sector is critical? Why are you not liquidating the sector to make sure that bills can be paid? Why are you not making sure that we go back to the 2015 tariffs to make sure that DISCOs can also function and provide also the backing that GENCOs can come in? So everything is not important. Simple. Reset means prioritize. If we need to sacrifice 5 arms of government spending to focus, to extend the grid, right? We have NYC people that don't have things to do. Why don't you bring them in and they be part of nation building? But you need to fund it. But you can't fund it if everything is important. Everything is not important. So reset means prioritization. Period.
Right.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bolaji. I work with the law firm of SPA Ajibade & Co.
Sorry, just a second. Gideon is your name? Yes. Gideon, okay. Yeah, Bolaji
Okay.
from Sparko.
Yes, please.
I'm a lawyer, by the way. Do you guys know that? Okay. No, because I mentioned the name of her firm, which she didn't use, Sparko. Well-known firm. We all know Sparko.
Yeah.
All right, so go on, Sparko lady. Bolaji.
Okay, so for me, reset is equity. And we keep talking about the discourse, but they are the last on the line.
Yes.
And I think the major problem is with the transmission companies, because if that we are generating power, we keep having megawatts that we are not seeing. And then we have a lot of stranded power that is not getting to the consumers. Yeah. And then also you have the issue of, and the transmission company is government, totally owned by the government. Now, the distributor, the discos are now saying, well, we are pushing a certain level of energy to us, which we know that we can't transmit, and then that is getting lost in between. Money is being lost in that angle. You are saying, okay, generates this the power that has been generated is not getting to the consumers. The consumers are shouting, we are not getting meters, we are being overbilled. I feel it's the issue of equity. If every part of the structure is playing its part, it's being following the terms in which it was, the guidelines in which it was formed, I think there will be better synergy, and then the end consumers will actually be on the better
on a better footing.
Better footing, exactly.
Right.
So I think it's really an issue of equity for me, for each of the groups to play their own path, and for the government to stop saying, well, we've privatized, so there's nothing we can do, while behind the scenes they are the one that is causing all the problems. That's just my point.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question. You want to decide with Bolaji? That means you're a nationalized person. Oh, you work in TCN transmission. I don't want this thing to degenerate into we give them power, we don't give them power. You see, the thing about TCN, you guys tend to be too defensive. You still cause system collapses. The first speaker, who was the first speaker? Was it Gideon? No, it was Kule. Kule, you were on some committee on system collapses, right? Wait first, by TCN. Hold on. He's gone? I wanted to ask him what he found out about system collapses. Okay. No, TCN, you know what? I don't want you to be defensive. TCN is not on the... You are not on the floor here. Nobody's going to stress you. But I would like to take... We have 4 more minutes. I would like us to consider another angle, right? Which is that the industry is still not fully privatized. So let's think about this. You have privately or majority privately held distribution companies. You have privatized generating companies at the other end. And in between, you have two very important players that we tend not to see, but are very present. One of them is my friend's company. What's the name, sir? Engineer Motorshaw's company, TCN. It controls a very important bottleneck, right? Imagine what would happen if Coca-Cola was producing all these bottles of Coke that we want to drink every day, and there were none of those big trucks to move them from the factory to the retailers. That's what TCN does. The other counterpart to TCN is Nigerian Gas Company. It's also government owned. No matter how much we want energy, if you don't have, in Nigeria at least, the dominant fuel is natural gas. And if you do not have that gas delivered, then of course you're in a problem. Now, all the gas production in this country is in the southern part of the country. And in fact, in the southeastern part, there's only one gas-fired generator in the entire north, and it's just around the corner here in Kogi. And most of us would not regard Kogi as really the north. It's more the central part of the country. So there's no thermal electricity being produced in northern Nigeria. And there are only how many plants in northern Nigeria? 3 or 4. Shiroro, Kainji, Jeba, and then the 2 plants in Ajaokuta. There are 2 generators. So there are 5, but nominally, I say them as 3. Right? Same place in Geregu or in Ajaokuta. Then mainstream, Kainji and Jeba, 1 entity. And then you have North-South power at Shiroro. So really there's an imbalance. Now, what I'm trying to address here is the bottleneck in transmission of electricity and natural gas. It's still controlled and owned by the federal government. Now, as long as you have that, can you really say that you have a privatized industry? And if that is the case, shouldn't we really be asking ourselves, how do we ensure that those 2 companies, first of all, gas is able to expand the network across the country, number 1. NGC has not built any new gas pipelines in forever. They've spent the last 10 years talking about ELPS 2, and we still haven't seen it, right? There's not a single inch of gas pipeline beyond Ajaokuta, which means essentially almost half the country. All right? So don't we see that as a challenge? Does anybody really understand what I'm trying to say here? Or yes, for me. But I want to see if anybody would agree with me that in itself is also a challenge, because you can renationalize, which I don't think we support. You can privatize, but as long as the bottlenecks are still controlled by publicly owned entities, would we continue to have a challenge or not? You want to deal with that? Okay.
Yes, so my name is Shehu Umar. So I'm an energy consultant focused on telecoms for the energy sector. So I'll speak to that question because you need to look at what agreements that TCN has with ECOWAS. First of all.
With who?
ECOWAS. So we have agreements as a country that you're bound to export power to particular countries. Even the model you propose,
which model?
Right? The model where you have a market that is completely privatized. So this whole gas and TCN part, that it's not something that is common across Africa. Somebody spoke about Abidjan now. They still control it. Gridco Ghana, they control theirs. CEB, Togo and Benin, they control theirs. Ketraco, Kenya, they control that. I mean, everybody controls that. If you create a model where you don't see it has worked, at least in Africa, what's the point? ESCOM, South Africa, they practically control everything, right? So in a power system, which is really a social kind of business, there needs to be a part that government plays.
But Shehu, right?
Yes, Shehu is my name.
Aren't you being counterintuitive? You are actually explaining why it hasn't worked. Right?
Not necessarily. I think you have to have
the point that Val was making, and that is my own position. Now I'm one of the panelists.
Yeah, sure.
Is that It is not ideological. In other places, it's ideological. Socialism versus capitalism. In Nigeria, it's not. It's survival. The government, once you are in government, you are disabled from being able to run something efficiently. Right? It's just the way, it's just the, what did Chair Achebe call it? The trouble with Nigeria.
I think we can argue, right? I mean,
Right?
let's look
So,
at LNG.
it's for necessity in our case.
It's a totally different model.
I get your point. But you see, I mean, I do SCADA and I do telecom, right?
Yes.
You talk about TCN and you look at a lot of the system collapses they speak about. They basically don't monitor 25% of the network. LNG evacuates gas from 9 points. Every single thing is monitored on point, real time. Projects executed by Nigerians with Nigerians running it.
Private sector.
Yeah, but the reality is that you need to have government. So whatever model you have with LNG, we have to duplicate something.
But we do
I'm
have
not
government.
just saying.
Don't we have government?
We have
In
government.
the critical area of regulation.
Yes. So you have TCN, you have ISO, you have MO, right? You have a market that is supposed to transition. You fix things as government. Now TCN has solidly raised money. They've raised money to fix things. There's no private person that will raise the amount of money that TCN has raised now from DFIs. That's the reality. So to some point, you have to at least have government try to make things work. So at some point, you now exit gradually. So, I mean, that's my case.
Great. Thank you very much, Shehu. So now we've heard pretty much from the audience, and I've also tried to throw in one or two other elements to the discussion. So let's come back to the panel. Awele, I know you've been wanting to say something. So don't worry, I'll come to you. I'll come to you. Let's come back. You've heard from the audience, Tope and Chiagozie. Okay. How do you think, in Tope's case, I know you've pushed for a reset, but you've heard two further definitions of reset. And then the other one was, from Gideon, was prioritize, right? But did I understood what you think should be prioritized? A sequence? Can you just give us a quick sequence of how you think we should prioritize?
Funding the sector.
Then what?
TCN, liquidating the sector also.
Liquidating?
Putting money. That's what it means.
Okay.
And then also making sure the tariff is, we can go back to 2015 at least to start with. At least it was, quote unquote, less political.
So how do you want to modify or build on what it is you've heard?
Thank you again. I think we're very much saying the same thing. I don't think there's anything that they've said that is not actually considered in the document. The document is very broad-based in terms of its analysis, and which is what has been missing. Power is not a simple task. And one of the things that has crippled the country is the lack of intellectual rigor in thinking about the sector. We just throw simple solutions. Throw some more money at it. Throw some more money at it. But it's actually a complex thing to manage. One of the issues that nobody has mentioned here is the tariff hike is one of the things that are critical to get the sector back on its feet. But hiking the tariff has a flip effect on the poor and on the vulnerable of society. Now, if you don't, before you hike the tariff, have some kind of mechanism to deal with those people, you're going to have a time bomb on your hands. So these are things that you sit down and you actually make sure you put together properly. The other thing that hasn't been thought about, and I think the PSRP actually addresses that, it is the issue of stakeholder engagement. I think a month or two before a tariff hike, there should be some kind of sensitization of everybody, get everybody on board. And basically, I think, for me, the only issue I have with the PSRP is that it plans to raise the tariff over a long period. I think it should be like you are pulling your tooth. Pull it out once. But before you pull it out, ensure that everybody is informed, ensure that everybody is on the same page, and just do it. Because, see, if you stretch it over a 6-year period, over a 7-year period, over a 3-year period, you're going to end up having to truncate the process along the line. So, and I think if you tell Nigerians what exactly they are getting, we used we were discussing a few days ago, and we talked about the the telecoms example. When telecom started, we had to buy SIM card. 20,000 naira for SIM card. 20K.
21 actually.
But now who is buying SIM card? So the thing is, we have to take that initial pain. So if you communicate properly that there needs to be an initial pain, and that pain is what our politicians have been trying to avoid over and over, and we have been pushing the evil day forward and pushing it forward and pushing it forward. But with proper packaging of this thing, Nigerians will sign on to it. Maybe people will come out. You know, when you watch a movie, I used to wonder how they do this when I was younger. A UK movie. They come out of one room, they off the lights, they turn off the lights. I say, what do they do these people? But when you get your bill, when they move the tariff, you get your bill. You'll be using candle. It's only when you want to read that you turn on the lights. So there needs to be an adjustment, a lifestyle adjustment. Power in anywhere in the world is expensive. So I'd rather have power predictable than have cheap power that I cannot get. And that is the communication that Nigerians have to get. Now, on the issue of the discos being dishonest, I would say the three parties involved in this privatization, the buy side, the sell side, and the financiers, everybody has shown some level of bad faith. Government has shown some bad faith. The discos have shown some bad faith, especially with this estimated billing thing. And then the financiers have shown bad faith. One of the things that the financiers did in this privatization, when they saw, and I'm sorry, there's some bankers here, when they saw that this system that government has contracted was not going to work, what they did was they told the concessionaires to bring third-party collateral to secure their loans. So someone like a Sahara had to pledge their business to fund assets. And this they did on multiple places. Which means that in reality, they saw that this contraption would not work. And then they told you to go and bring something else. Instead of them to tell you to go and make sure the thing works properly. So everybody in the system has shown some bad faith. So all those things are the things we need to re-engineer, and we must be ready to pull our tools. Nigerians, everybody must be ready to just bite the bullet and reset the system. That is my idea of a reset.
Okay. Chiagozie, so the industry is actually, as I try to point out, partially nationalized. Actually, significantly so. TCN and NGC. Still in government hands. Right? And then the discos, 40%. So there's still a significant presence of the government. Has that been beneficial? I've heard what Shehu said, right? And you also heard what he said, but has that been beneficial as things are? Or you think now, and I would like you to make a case for this, set aside your natural instincts and try and appreciate the fact that you still have nationalization in that significant bottleneck segment transmission, and you also have it in discourse. Isn't that enough? Isn't that something that should be built on? And if it can be built on, how should it be built on?
Well, my understanding of your question is that, okay, look, TCN and NGC held by the government, can that be leveraged to benefit the sector? Is that what you're saying? Mm-hmm. That's enough? You don't need to go further than that in nationalizing? Bear in mind what Val said. Well, I think well,
there are no angels in Nigeria.
No. That's not correct. I think what it is someone gave the example of LNG, which is often put out as a successful model for government and private sector participation. And in some ways you could say that that's the case. But some others would argue that government hasn't been able to, even in that setting, to maximize the rent that it could get from being the owner of the natural resource. But that's a discussion for another day. Okay? But certainly there's no question. I mean, there's no question that when you have government acting as a bottleneck and being a shareholder in the discos, for example, government has a pretty significant role as things stand. And it's arguable that that engagement or involvement hasn't actually been beneficial. Okay? I think that, if you look at it, it probably makes raising money that bit more difficult, okay? Where it puts a limit on, for example, in discos, right? To what extent are you going to be able to have shareholders, for example, giving shareholder loans, which is a normal way of, financing business, okay? I have some friends of mine in the finance sector who've argued actually that the interventions that government has done, okay, they've done in a totally wrong way. That in fact, what they ought to have done is perhaps given the monies that they've put into the sector, right? Even in the reset, for example, give it to private sector, okay, who now put it in as private equity, which is a completely different model from simply lending money.
To what purpose?
Board seats.
Sorry? Corporate governance,
yes.
Money, monitoring supervision.
Just to interject.
And the emphasis would be on making a return.
So they would be investing on behalf of the federal government?
They'll be taking a risk on their own account. Because government will lend to them at constitutional rates, but they will take the equity risk of investing in these businesses. Okay? And then you could say that what's left, that what doesn't attract this kind of investment can then be left for government. You could say it's a sort of cherry picking. Okay?
Just to interject, actually, the PSRP actually has these elements in it.
Yeah.
So in the governance side of the policy, what they're trying to do is actually to leverage all this government ownership to enforce the governance mandates. Because what they try to do, because the downside of renationalization, basically, is that you send a very bad signal to the market. Once you renationalize an asset, or you collect an asset, nobody wants to do anything PPP with you again.
And it's not even just in the power sector, by the way.
Every sector.
It will have
it ripples all around. So what the PRSP is doing is that it's trying to use the leverage, the legal leverage that government has with the discos, the 40%, to appoint credible people into just a similitude of what you're saying, into the boards, and basically use that to influence governance. So it's not basically a stick and it's basically some kind of systematic. So that's why I like the plan. It's quite intuitive.
Okay. Awele, what were you so eager to tell us? Why? She will explain why.
Very quickly.
Yes.
Awele Okibo, I'm CEO of Credo Advisory.
Is that all?
Yes.
That's what you're going to tell us.
I think we should be having a different discussion.
Right.
I feel as if we're having a discussion on whether Nigeria should be turning left or turning right. And the question is, who is doing the turning? Who is actually in the driver's seat? Until government is no longer a significant stakeholder, whether privatization or renationalization, we have to admit that right now we have heads of agencies and people in key government positions who may not be fit to actually implement their roles. So you can have the best plan. PSRP, fantastic, it may be flawed. There's a new one, Nigerian Education Roadmap, Siemens. You can have the best plan, but who is in the driver's seat? Government. And until we have a government who are actually putting the square pegs in square holes, this is all just an academic exercise.
Which one?
Everything. So to me, reset is actually that we have competitive and recruitment where people are actually, sorry?
Merit-based.
Merit-based. And not just merit, sorry? But specifically, people should be given the right roles. We have a new minister now. I'm hopeful, and I'm hoping that not just a minister, but across the board, because you're only as good as your weakest link. All it takes is one head of agency to not know what they're doing, and the entire process is corrupt. Stalled. So reset should also address this fundamental issue. Government is a key stakeholder, whether we're renationalizing or privatizing. So we need to fix that first before we can actually have a chance to actually successfully implement any plan. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. So we have a few more minutes. WhatsApp questions. Right. Do we have any?
This question from Hillary. Hillary says the reset model appears good to go. However, what about the funds that were being raised by the government to NEPA staff in the first instance? Do we have the financial capacity to meander?
Sorry, I didn't. What was that again?
The reset model
Yes.
appears good to go.
Okay.
However, what about the funds that was being paid by the government to the NEPA staff in the first instance? Do we have the financial capacity to meander?
Meander. Okay.
It's right here. You can explain your question.
Who?
That's Hillary, right?
We have another question.
Oh, Hillary, who was
Why-
the question for? For our reset
All of us.
speaker or for both?
Everybody, the
Everybody.
panelists.
Did you get the question?
I'm not clear on the...
All right. Can I have the phone? Maybe I can rephrase it. Do we? Okay. So Hillary's point is this. When the generating and the distribution companies were privatized, something like 4 billion or so was collected from the core investors on both in both sectors, just about under 4 billion, and then paid back to the staff of the PATN successor companies, right? Because the assumption was that on the day of privatization, their services would be terminated, and of course, they all would then get severance payments, which were taken from these proceeds of privatization. Okay? Now, how can you, I think that's a question, how do you nationalize when you have already taken the benefit, right, and used it? In other words, if you can take the assets back, but give back my money with interest. As a good banker, right? Okay. Do we have the financial capacity to meander? Is that bit that just has me puzzled?
Perambulation.
To navigate the rapids of having to pay back the money. Is that what you're saying? Okay. So, between these two guys, who should your question go to? All right. Wait.
So just to recap your question, you're saying that, so the question seems like a reset or renationalize, because the reset is not saying take it back.
Yeah.
So it's nationalized, actually.
So it's nationalized that you are saying?
It's nationalized.
Yeah, the research at this instance, my name is Hillary. Yeah, the research at this instance is talking about the fact that there has been mistakes in the past, and essentially we're trying to add value.
Can I open it so I can see the second question?
The roadmap in itself is talking about advancing the cause of the power sector in Nigeria. You understand?
Okay.
We've had our mistakes. Let's add value. Let's move forward.
So let me explain how I think this would work. The reset in itself is actually not a new plan.
No.
What it's saying is the old plan is actually an excellent plan if everybody did what they were supposed to do. It's an excellent plan on paper. If we did that plan for the kind of country that, what's our man's name?
Singapore.
Val.
Oh, Val.
The utopia country that Val was talking about. If we did that plan, we would have gotten Nobel Prize for that plan. Unfortunately, the plan was made for Nigeria. So the reset is saying, let's go back to the plan. And all the things we did not do, let's do it. And then whatever problems we have caused by not doing what we're supposed to do, let's fix it. So the monies that were paid in light of the plan. So that is still on course.
Yeah.
It's still on course. So what we're now talking about is there are now debts that have been owed. There are things that have crystallized, things that have spoiled. All those things, government is willing to bend over and clean it up because, like I said, the three parties involved in this have all shown bad faith. So they are all going to share. And one thing I'm going to say, I don't think we got to it, is that I don't think that investors, and I'm going to say this is a very, I hope I don't get ekeredumarized. What's that? After saying this. I don't think all investors should be made whole. I think they should be healed, not made whole. And I'll explain what I mean by the difference. To be made whole is to say, you would have made 4 billion. You did not make 4 billion. Now we're going to give you 4 billion plus interest. I don't think that should be the mindset. Because we all contributed to the quagmire. And the risk of that, the risk of making people whole in this kind of, and I'm a finance person, the risk of making them fully whole is that if you make all the investors whole, you likely trigger a liability from the reserve bidders. Because it's now a free for all. Everybody has chopped money. I bidded something, my price did not reach, and now you are doing largesse. They will trigger lawsuits. So, but if everybody takes a haircut, if you want to trigger a lawsuit, come and take your own haircut too. I'm not sure anybody will be interested in that. So we have to be careful about how, like I said, this power system is quite complex. And we need to have people that understand how these things fit together to run it. Otherwise, we'll keep on making mistakes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. So there are 3 or 4 other questions here. I will take the liberty of trying to summarize them. From actually Shola Ephraim Oluwanuga has two interventions here. The first one, he says, when you talk of nationalization, are you saying we should go the way of bundling or vertical integration? I guess he meant rebundling because they were unbundled. That's one from Shola. I'll let Shola have 1A and 1B. Then 1B, he says, for a reset, there should be a real competitive market. Remove the geographical monopolies of the discos, move progressively towards privatization of the system operator. So my question to you would be, do you agree with that? So the first one, so think about that. The first question, Chiagoze, is when you talk of nationalization, are you talking about rebundling?
I think there are several ways of looking at it. You know, rebundling makes sense because that way you can probably end up with an entity that has a balance sheet that has a chance of, you know, of
being financed?
Yeah, being financed. Okay. That's what I would say. But it could happen in other ways. You could keep the current structure and just do it, you know, based on the entities that you have at the moment. Okay. And this actually, maybe this is a good point to say something to make a comment I have about the PRSP.
Yes.
In my view, one of the things that, and by the way, I could argue more strongly for reset, as you can see.
We know already.
But
stay on your lane.
Yeah, I know. But one of the things I find that's missing here is that, you know, once again, I don't think it is quite explicit what would happen, right? Because presumably, this reset is done on the assumption that the entities would have some obligations. They have some things to do. What happens if they fail to do those things? I don't think it's so clear-cut what the consequences would be.
Okay.
Because, you see, there has to be an end to reset. But the way this is set up, frankly, it's not clear that this is the final reset.
No, if you look at the original plan to move from pre-transition to transition to medium-term market, you could say that each inflection point at which they were going to move from one state to the other was effectively a reset.
Yeah, true.
The question is your reset a continuous in itself? Is each reset a process that never ends?
The way I see the reset as defined now is essentially government is going to put money into the system. It's not necessarily at each inflection point that they would, you know, the way it's originally envisioned.
So let me tell you one of the things that triggered this kind of government putting money every time. NERC, when it was set up, actually set up the short-term, what do you call the first intervention? The short, there's a long one. What's the
one in 2014, 2015?
The 6 month intervals, what do you call those ones? The
minor
reviews and the long-term. So those minor reviews, because the elements that make up the tariff are actually moving.
Of course.
Forex, gas prices, inflation, everything is moving. So the regulator, the NEC was supposed to be moving the tariff. But what happened was that it has been stagnant. And once it's stagnant, the bills begin to accumulate. So it's this long-term stagnation that has led to these multiple resets.
Sure.
So one of the issues that they deal with there is that the regulator has to become a strong regulator, an independent and strong regulator. They put it on paper, how they're going to effective.
When you say strong regulator, you mean, of course, one that is insulated from political influence.
Yes.
Fundamentally, that's what it is. Because if you're talking about in terms of...
Can you see my wide green?
No, but it's true. Let's look, and this is an aspect that we haven't really said too much about.
And it's the key.
It's a large reason, one big reason for the problems in the sector is political intervention and influence. And it's not clear in this document that's... Sorry.
No, go ahead, check it.
It's not clear in this document that that's going to be removed or reduced, frankly.
Like I said, one of the flaws of the document is that a lot of things are still within the government's control. And in that...
When you say government, what do you mean by government?
So...
remember what Babachir Lawal said? Presidency? Who is presidency? So in this case, government? Who is government?
Okay, thank you for that question again. So one of the flaws of the original plan, like I said, it was a perfect plan, but there are too many time-sensitive tasks that have to be performed by a government counterparty.
Okay.
Now that is a recipe for failure. Now that same flaw is still in this plan.
Yeah.
There are so many things that need to be done by some government agency or the other.
Are these government agencies outside the sector?
Some in the sector, some outside the sector. Okay. Some. So those issues have to be somehow excluded and expedited. So Nigeria is good with a one-off, pull out the tooth. But a program that you're running, you lose track.
Not going to work. Okay, so we have just under, slightly more than 30 minutes to close. I would like to modify the program a little bit. We had only 3 minutes for summary and recommendations for action. I'm not sure that will be enough. So what I'd like us to do is to just add one more small dimension to the discussion, and then we will ask ourselves, what do we think should be done? And I would like that question to be answered after we also ask ourselves. We are fortunate to have been told the names of the 2 ministers in the ministry. What do we think they should be doing over the next 4 years, given what we've heard this evening?
I kind of agree with what Awele said, that either way, it's government is involved in some way. But government, for me, in this case, is really the regulator. Yeah? And I wonder what can be done to strengthen the regulator. Someone on the panel has had some time to think about this issue. And I wonder if you could share with us, first of all, what are the challenges that the regulator in Nigeria is facing today? And what can be done to strengthen that regulator? Because if the regulator is not strong, forget about all these, all these things we're talking about here. I don't want to call it academic, like some other people did, but yeah.
Okay, so let me provide some background. The guiding document is called the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, right? And in that document, the word minister is mentioned only once. And it is in section 33, where it says the minister is entitled, is empowered to give general policy directives, not specific, general. Okay, and that means you state an objective and ask the established players in the industry to work towards that objective. And like all good policy, the directive ought not to be put in until there has been a consultative process. In civilized countries, and I'm saying here implicitly that we're not yet civilized, and it's not in this regard, and I'm saying so quite directly, our ministers get up, make statements, and it becomes policy. In other places, ministers say, we would like to see certain things happen. And they give an analysis in something called a blue paper.
Yeah.
right? It's put out there for 2 months, 3 months. And every single stakeholder can intervene and react to that document. Then they hold a number of focus group sessions. Take direct contributions from those things. And at the end of the day, what you have is a policy paper that sets out very clearly where they are, what they have, where they would like to get to, and how they want to get there. And then you have the various levers, players of government, whose task it is now to push for that promised land. We don't do that here. So, EPSRA, minister is mentioned, one place. The regulator is all over the document, of course. What do we have on the ground? I think that's what Patrick is really asking us to try and address. All right? Allied to that question of Patrick's is the one which I also want to ask us. We now have 2 ministers in the Ministry of Power. What do we think they should be doing over the next 4 years? And let's bear in mind what Patrick said. All right? Do we have people who can try and just throw out here desired actions with a clear-cut set of, a very clear objective with a number of desired actions to drive towards those objectives? Is there anybody that would like to take a hazard something? All right? The gentleman in the cream hat.
For me,
yes,
we have spent the last 4 years discussing and understanding and analyzing this sector to depth. And I think towards the end of the last regime, or rather the last government, we had certain documents which we all agree can move the sector forward. The first being the Power Sector Recovery Program, and then towards the end of, I think towards the end of May or June, there were some policy directives which I think I bumped into by the ministry.
Which one?
Some people will argue there were some policy sector directives which talked about a couple of things to be done. Reinvesting in the discos, and first putting some demands on both BPE, NERC, and everybody. People can argue that that should have come from NERC because I think that was one of the challenges we saw there. Why should the ministry be the one issuing these directives? But if you read through, we have really understood the issues, and we now seem to have a clear line of thought on what we should do. These new ministers should please just come and ride on that. And which is one of the reasons why I'm not too happy today. I should have commented, I'm not very happy because I was really hoping that Raji Fashola would be the Minister of Power. But anyway, the key thing is we studied it, there are key things, take those documents and just run with it.
Okay. There's a gentleman at the back.
First off, I just got an email now that NERC has increased their tariffs for 2020 on the website. I'm not sure if it's common knowledge, but I think that's a good start. It shows that we're moving in the right direction. Secondly, I can speak from two different hats. I developed the power project, as my day job, and I was involved in bidding for AFAM and Sapele plant. And some things happened during those bids that
Which
were
of the bids? The second AFAM or the first one?
The first one, in
2013.
Yeah. We got to the final rounds in both, actually, and lost to some very, let's just forget that.
People that had more money, come on now.
Yes.
People that had more money than you.
Yes. I keep telling people that, like for me, for instance, our IRRs were stretched already at the numbers we put in. And the winning bids were literally hundreds of millions more.
Yeah.
And I kept scratching my head that there's no way anybody putting this kind of money
will get his money back.
Yeah. But, over the years, you become friends with these people, you realize their thinking going into those bids were off. I have someone that told me word for word, he just thought he would go in there, they literally put on a switch, and he starts to make money. That's all he thought. Mm-hmm. And when the investors go in, they check, they say, we need to put in X amount of billions of dollars. You may have to wait 4 or 5 years before you get your first money. They say, this is not. And he has literally folded his hands and watched his power plants literally just remain the way they were when he got it. This is not hearsay. This is my personal.
Okay, so let's go on.
Yes. Anyway, so for what we've been talking about today, I think in terms of reset, we need to look at it as a wholesome issue in terms of policy. There's just so much wrong in every sector, in every single niche of the Nigerian power sector that when we say reset, I think we just need to take a step back and ask ourselves what exactly we want to achieve with these things. We look at TCN, for instance. I've tried to develop some papers saying TCN should, be split up into different areas. Allow a section of TCN look at maybe the Southwest and say, look, Ibadan Disco, Lagos Eco Disco, Ikea Disco, you guys all develop your grid to fit your demands, and then you can have interlinks between whatever grid section and that section if they need power in one section. It will be a good way to go, because having the grid and the system operator belonging to people who frankly don't care, I think has led us to where we are today. I looked at a map recently about, if you provided power to people who really pay for their power in Nigeria, if you didn't have the system operator doing federal character with power, you would have a map where the southwest of Nigeria would be very, very, very bright. And sorry to say, a lot of the north would just be in perpetual darkness. This was a study done by some credible people. And it just led us to realize that there's so much wrong with how we see power. Power should not be something to be shared. It should not be something we should give people because we think they deserve it. This is the price of power. If you cannot pay it, try to find a different solution to that and not say you have to reduce it and make sure that everybody gets it. Secondly, my final point is that in terms of what we should...
Anyway, go ahead.
I've lost track. We also tried certain things, where I live anyway. And on a whole street, they are nice estates, but in between those estates, there are pockets of poor people. Let's just put it that way. And we discussed with the disco, and we said, look, provide us power at 60, at 70 naira, 69 something, 69 naira, 80 kobo. I think I've shared this here before. And we said, look, if you're charging these guys next door 4 naira, leave it at the 4 naira. Within our 69 naira and the 4 naira, your blended tariff came to about 50 something. And we're like, look, we'll pay you on time. We'll pay for our meters. This was years ago, before any of these things came up. And they'll test it for 3 months, for 4 months, and let's just see how it goes. Got the meters, set them up to their new tariff, and started providing us power. I haven't used a gen in 5 years. And I'm pretty sure my disco used the sense they got from that, and they've started doing it in certain places. Look, if there's an industry here, we'll give you power at 150, 140. And people on that line as well, keep them at their 4 naira, their 6 naira, their 8 naira, whatever it is you're charging them. You're subsidizing them, but you're getting power you want to fix your needs. And I remember 2015, all of us just threw our gens away. Literally put our gens outside the estate gate for people to take. Because we have light. Unless the grid goes down, I have light. And if we get to that point, that is what we can do. If that disco, somebody decides to take power at a higher rate for some type of people that can't do it, we'll move somewhere.
So, Adejo.
Femi Adejo.
No, not you. The man who spoke before you. I'm calling on him. If you listened to what he said, right, it's not in any of these documents. What he suggested, it's not in any of them. The point I want to make is that the policy, in quotes, papers that we have are really not policy because they are not the outcome of an involved process of discussion. It is a minister and a small clique putting together a document, taking it to the president, who will approve it. Now, a policy is what we agree to. And so, one of the things that I'm already making down a recommendation here, Patrick, I think it's time that you went beyond a 3-hour session in Thought Pyramid and work with the industry to try and organize a dialogue. We haven't had one since 2000. Right? I was involved in 2001. It led to the Nigerian Electric Power Policy of 2001. And that was when we didn't have an industry that was anything like this. So it was only a small group of people that put that document together. We now have a much larger industry, much more knowledge, much more interest. Right? None of those people have come together in 18 years. That document said it will be reviewed every decade. It wasn't reviewed in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Instead, we took a bit of it and made it into what? What document that we put out in PTFP? Roadmap. And it was really a roadmap to say the things that should have done in that policy, let's now do them. So we really haven't had a dialogue where we will shout, argue, accuse ourselves, then settle down and ask ourselves, okay, how do we take this thing forward? What do we do about TCN? Should we have one monolithic TCN or 3 or 4 regional TCNs? Right? With their own system operators, which would of course mean that next function would slightly change in a way. All right? It has, the various ideas that are there have implications. So one recommendation that I am definitely going to suggest is, Mr. Minister, it would be nice if one of the first things you did was to organize a policy dialogue for the country. Right? And have the states, in all these discussions that we have had, we haven't mentioned the people who run the places where Nigerians actually live. We don't live in Abuja. Nigeria doesn't live in Abuja. Nigeria lives in 36 states. And we have never really involved any of those 36 states in this discussion. Who says that Lagos State and Ogun State together should not have their own electricity market? What's to say? The problem that the negotiants have is not the one that the guys in Zamfara have or in Cross River. It's not. They have a very different problem, differently dimensioned, differently dealt with. Why don't we have that discussion? So, I'm already getting to the end. But, gentlemen there, do we have rapporteurs? It's on video. Okay, so, all right, good. So, gentlemen, sir.
I'm going to be very quick. We've said everything that we need to say, but I think everything borders around 3 particular areas.
Edward.
Number 1 is policy. And to do that, I think we need to pick the PSRP again. Like our moderator has said, in addition to the existing PSRP laws, let's have a rejig of what that framework is right now. Secondly, the issue of recapitalization. We've looked at why government is funding and why we think we should renationalize. Well, if we look at renationalizing, we are talking about going back to the reason why the framework was developed in the first place in 2005. It was developed because it was in the hands of the government and it was a failed entity. So are you saying we should go back to the primary reason why we developed the framework in the first place? That's not an option.
Why not?
Sorry?
Why should it be an option?
That's not an option. That's not an option. Because the issue is that there are flaws in the method of execution of the framework that was developed to solve the problem.
Okay.
That's where the issue is. Because going back is taking us back. Okay. So
and we have to move forward.
We have to move forward.
All right.
So if we look...
Even if we are going down a hill into a pit.
No. We are down the hill already.
Okay.
We're down the hill already. We need to start going up. But you're going up along the curve is because
you clearly don't play golf. Because if you play golf, you know that sometimes you have to hit your ball backwards so you can go forward. But okay. No problem.
That doesn't apply in this case.
Good point.
So for me, that's policy.
Right.
We need to pick that policy up, dust it up again, hold whatever forums we need to hold, rejig that policy in the National Assembly, and empower the regulator to do his job. Because right now, those guys in NARC, I don't even know what they're doing. And if you ask them, the truth is they are not independent. If you want to compare them with other regulatory agencies like NCC that are succeeding, then we need to find out why. Why? So that's a policy. The second is recapitalization.
Yeah, I got that. And the third one?
The third one is the issue of subsidies, and I'll talk about that.
Subsidy?
Yes, subsidy.
Yes.
Recapitalization, we cannot be talking about recapitalization using government funds. I mean, that doesn't help us in empowering these businesses to thrive. We need to look at how the government can, I made that suggestion in several forums, they can, let go of 15%, 20% of their existing shares, okay? And also, they can, being part of the owners, they can hold forums with the original owners who are willing to, enlist these things in the market and allow other investors to be able to buy off. There could be, among the 60% shareholders, people who actually want to give away their shares. If you enlist this thing on the stocks, I'm sure there will be a lot of other people who are qualified and interested and ready to.
Well, how does that deal with the subsidy issue?
That's recapitalization. Subsidy is existing in the power sector today because there is an issue of fund generation from the discos. The generating stations are generating a particular level of power. They sell at a certain rate to TCN, managed by bulk trading. Then that particular amount, TCN says they cannot pay because the money from discos.
Okay, Edward, let me put it this way. Do you want the subsidy to remain or to go?
Let me be very quick, okay? I'll be very quick. This is the last point. This is the last point, okay? The subsidies are there because there are loopholes in the system.
All right.
Okay? Now, if you look at the tariff rate that was actually,
Edward, yes or no? Subsidy or no subsidy?
There shouldn't be subsidies if the pricing, the tariff rates were actually enforced as was agreed.
How can
but since hold on, let me just finish.
All right.
There shouldn't be subsidies if the tariff rates as agreed at inception were implemented. But because you've got that lapse where the government, as you are having in the petroleum sector now, where they're subsidizing PMS, you now have to subsidize at the generating level because the generators say they cannot continue to supply or pay for gas if you do not subsidize. You decide.
You haven't said to me yes or no yet. So I will take your should be as yes. In which case then, the question comes back to your second point about recapitalization.
Yes.
Can you possibly recapitalize anything if that thing has no hope of recovering its costs?
That is why
Who is the sucker? Who is the fool that will give you money knowing full well that he will never get it back?
Because your policy is a failed
Chagoze has answered.
And
no, don't worry.
The federal government of Nigeria.
Your pricing framework is also faulty. These are the key indexes.
So what I'm going to is that you actually have, Edward, what I'm going to is that you actually have only two issues, not three.
Okay.
If you say policy, I guess we all are fine with that.
Yes.
We also say recapitalize. But recapitalize has a B part, which comes to the finance issue. You have to set the right tariff. Now, that is not to coalesce or to condense the entire problem into one thing called tariff. But as they say, first principles. Again, let me intervene. The industry is a business. It's none of us, as I always say, we all come from villages where there are markets. Every one of us. North, south. Is there anyone who does not have a market in his village here? No. So we all understand the logic of markets. Because the ones in our villages have been there from the beginning of time. They're not dead yet.
When you correct this, the investors will definitely
Edward, the point I'm trying to make is that there are only 2 points. The policy issue and the capitalization issue, or the recapitalization issue, which itself resolves on the question of what do we actually need to collect from our customers to be able to stay in business and grow the business.
Correct.
Only two. Correct. Now, if you then have those two, there's no need for a subsidy.
Correct.
Okay, so there are two issues. No, it's time to round up and... Which one?
Advice for the minister.
Oh, for the minister, yes. All right. You too? Yes. This minister is going to get a bunch of advice. All right.
Well, just quickly. About
That's VAL, right?
VAL, yes.
VAL.
About the viability of the discos and the gencos.
All right.
If you want to build a house and you give a foreman and you are away, the house is supposed to be like 4 floors.
Mm-hmm.
And you come back and you realize that what the man has done as foundation can only take a bungalow.
Yes.
What do?
Build a bungalow.
I'm not talking politics here. I think there was a fundamental error in the caliber of people that got the discos and the gencos. We know how that happened. And we cannot continue to close our eyes and pretend that they are doing well. They are not doing well. Most of them are politicians. Somebody talked about regulatory authorities. Where ex-heads of state are involved, how do you regulate that authority? That entity. So, if the minister really wants to work, let us revisit those contracts. When we want to play football, we go and look for a foreign coach. Why do we do that? Why not take a Nigerian coach? So we must be able to be bold enough to say, look, we made a mistake. Let's go back. Lawyers are here. Nigeria has very good lawyers. The KPIs, they have all already messed up. Throw them out and get foreign firms that can manage these things.
Okay.
That's where to start from. Now, because I don't want to mention, I come from the southeast, but I know that there are villages that don't have power sometimes 60 days at a time. And we're all Nigerians. And you go to Metama, you have like 85% of the time.
No, generator.
Okay,
go ahead.
So the thing is that let the minister revisit those contracts. Let's go back to the drawing table. Throw them out and get qualified people.
All right.
Well, can I make a point?
No,
no,
you can't. Then the gentleman.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, my name is Engineer Peter Obisin.
Peter?
Obisin.
Olisa?
Obisin.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a suggestion I want to give. We had this discussion last meeting, Nigerian Institute of Power Engineers.
Yes.
And in the repertoires, all these discussions were taken and put down as a piece of document to be given to government. What I don't know now whether it has been submitted to the presidency or yet to be there. So I want to suggest that before we come for the next meeting, policy and all we discussed. So we meet the Nigerian Institution of Power Engineers. The national chairman is in Abuja here. We visit them and get that piece of document. All these things have been put together as what the new minister can have to run with. That's what I want to suggest. All these things have been covered there and way forward to the power sector.
All right.
Yeah. Both
Thank you very much.
policy, on nationalization or subsidy, all of them are covered.
Okay. Thank you very much. You know, there's a bit of a mischievous streak in me. Yes, there is. I suppress it most of the time. But today I'm going to put it out with a question. Is it possible to have an effective NERC with a ministry of power in place? The evidence is to the contrary.
So can I speak to that in a rather roundabout way?
She says we have 1 more minute. That's why my timekeeper has been waving 1 more minute at me for a while. But that's food for thought.
Can I let me speak to it.
Because we'll start again.
No. That will be a discussion. We'll continue.
We'll continue. I am not going to let you start. But I will ask the question though. I think it's food for thought. I have a very clear and a very strong view based on my PhD from the University of Harrowing Experience and Hard Knocks. Because I was a regulator, right? And I know what regulators have to go through when you have the person called a minister who has FaceTime with the president and you don't have. Yet, the responsibility, which is why I said, and it passed over our heads, I'm going to repeat it again. The Electric Power Sector Reform Act is the sole operating document for the industry. It mentions the minister only once, but places all the responsibility for the design of the electricity market, for the overseeing the operation of the electricity market, for setting in place the basic foundation of the industry, which is a cost-reflective tariff on the regulator, and says that the regulator is to be independent in carrying out those responsibilities. But when the president is told that the power sector is not working, he never picks up his phone and dials the chairman of NEC. Who does he call?
The minister.
Now, which minister
who is in fact
with
him every week
that
or every
Mr.
fortnight?
President, is not me, talk to the chairman of NEC?
You will say it's their fault.
So, is it possible, really, to have an effective and empowered regulator with a minister? Let me try and round up the discussions. I think we've had a very interesting, hopefully interactive session today. The one thing that I'm going to come out with is that 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. ain't good enough. Right? Patrick, we should have a few days and we break it up into little bits, try and discuss those little bits, and then bring it all back together on the last day into one whole. Maybe we will get something that can be productive. Because as we found out, the power sector is a massive elephant. Right? If you've really listened to the discussions today, there are various aspects. Even though we discussed just two things, do we either nationalize or we reset? But in the course of answering, we find out that it's a many-sided, multifaceted problem that implicates various disciplines: engineering, economics, law, policy, administration. And the answer to the question is actually not one. It's multifaceted. Because when you finally deal with the tariff question, and what I'm saying here is that we've actually not even started. When you finally deal with the tariff question, you then have other questions revealed to you. And so, in terms of recommendations, am I right in saying that the temperature of this room tells me that we should reset and not renationalize? Hey, come on now. People should answer me.
Reset on terms.
No, come on. It's too late. You've lost. So, we need to reset, yes. Do we?
Yes.
But reset, as Chagoze says, on terms, and understanding that it's actually a series of, the gentleman who said prioritize, right? There are a series of things that need to be done. One of my favorite words when I was in NEC was simultaneous sequentiality. Because there are so many things that you need to do almost at the same time, but you must do them one after the other, right? And the art of this is how you are able to get one to start just as the other is almost finishing, and then you time them all together. So we have to reset, yes, but I think that we also need to have a discussion, Patrick. So on that note, I don't know how well I have done, but let us instead thank our two speakers, Kokwe Akinyemi and Chagoze Hilary Wakonko, and hope that the outcomes from this will be productive, and we'll all come back here again next month on Patrick's invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Just before we go, my name is Godswill Kuchukwu of Next Year Power. On behalf of Next Year Power MacArthur Foundation, we wish to thank every last one of us for taking out the time to sit with us, for bridging the reins to come in here and give us a full room
And that's something that gives us a lot of confidence, knowing fully well that we want this sector to start, to work. Thanking everybody, thanking the moderator, the panelists. Thank you for taking out the time. For the next session again, third Wednesday of every month, that's the 18th, we'll do well to share the information with every one of us, just to get us back in here again, so we'll continue to put in this work. We hear you very clearly, sir. You said 3 hours is not enough. Maybe we can start to think about it, but for now, let's also think some more about how we can own these problems that we have articulated. We need to own it. The stakeholders need to hold hands together and realize that this is a collective effort. We can't keep working in silos. So if that's a key thing that we can take, whether we stick or we twist, then we'll find out. But for tonight, thank you so much for taking out the time. Have a good night. Cheers.